Chapter 3. Details. 12 hours passed. Tempus was used to silently waiting while its host slept. The parasite itself only slept when it absolutely had to. It knew the future, at least until it joined with Sylvester. What was coming was all new. Tempus floated in space for 10,000 years before finally arriving at this point in time. There were always two possibilities of where it would end up. The first was, of course, Cedar Vale, Kansas, where it was to be hosted by Sylvester, which clearly happened. It still wasn't sure what they were destined to do together, but it was sure this was the better option. The other possibility was that it would be sent to a planet that the Earthlings called Mars. Once there, it would rest on the surface. In this reality, Tempus would experience the feeling of being run over dozens upon dozens of times by machinery sent from Earth. The first real human host would have been decades later when the humans from Earth finally decided to colonize the Red Planet. Tempus was ecstatic that Sylvester was its destiny. For centuries it thought the Mars option would be its fate. Tempus passed planet after planet, some destroyed, others flourishing with life. About 3,000 years after Tempus separated from the Tempus parasita colony, it was passing a planet with weird, translucent beings of different color and size. They hovered around, waiting for some inevitability that it would never understand. Tempus assumed they were preparing to invade the teal globe. A large, six-sided rectangular black stone rushed from the planet, carrying a large grouping of the translucent beasts with it. The stone and its colorful entourage rushed silently over the parasite. At first, Tempus looked at the incident with disdain. It was angry that the ship had pushed the parasite toward its destiny even quicker. Tempus floated for nearly 6,500 years after that, to the inevitable crossroad that would push it to either Earth or Mars. Then it happened. A blue box created a vortex that shoved the parasite away from Mars. The pilot of the crazy blue ship opened its doors and stared at the spot where Tempus was. The person hanging out of the doors was seemingly aware of the being floating there. He looked like what Tempus expected a human to look like. The man mumbled something. Tempus only slightly heard the words, "Not good," as the blue box continued along its own path. Tempus understood what the blue-suited man meant by those two words. Whoever Sylvester was, it was possible that their pairing could in fact not be good. It never had morality, so it depended heavily on its host to decide what was right and what was wrong. The only thing that it controlled was what they could and could not change. Tempus would list all of those things for Sylvester when the man eventually woke up. Often, Tempus parasita caused their hosts to sleep for long periods after first contact. It wasn't surprising for the beings to sleep for weeks. In those situations, though, they wound up in some form of a hospital in a coma. Sometimes, the treatments would kill the host and the parasite within. Tempus was hoping this wouldn't be the case. It waited, reflecting on its long life. It was no longer connected to the hive knowledge that the Tempus colony learned with every connection. Most other Tempus were connected until they died, which was usually eons after they departed. They would send information from their host, updating the hive on their activities and the do's and don'ts of their own abilities. This Tempus didn't miss the connection. It was constant feedback about the same old things that it was tired of hearing about. Tempus parasita existed for eons before the start of the universe. They were a being living safe between non-existence and the beginning of time. The most recent transfer of rules, before Tempus lost contact, was bound to be its final communication with the colony. Sylvester woke with a start. He remembered what happened this time. Even if he didn't, the sudden and annoying Brox-accented parasite wouldn't let him forget. It was only seconds after his mind woke that the being living within him announced itself. "Good morning, sleepyhead." The voice was loud and obnoxious. It slightly sang the phrase to him. Sylvester didn't respond right away. He took in his surroundings, recalling where his truck was, as well as how he had arrived at his home. Sylvester blinked a few times, looking around the darkened room, then at his clock. 3 a.m. on Monday. He slept through his last day off, and it was time to start working the farm. He rubbed his face with both hands, hoping to arouse the sleep that had yet to leave his weary body. Still, the parasite, or as it may as well be known, his new buddy, sang on, and loud. "Dude, shut up," he whispered. Tempus went silent and returned to its waiting state. Sylvester was still wearing the jeans and t-shirt he wore Saturday night before it came. Normally, Sylvester didn't shower first thing in the morning, but his clothes felt moist and damp with sweat. He hoped the moisture was nothing else. The hallway was already lit outside his room, and the whole house was moving about their normal daily routines. Sylvester exited, with clothes in one hand and hat in the other. The smell of bacon and sweet hotcakes filled the air. His stomach growled uncontrollably as he made his way toward the bathroom. The door was closed, and Sylvester knocked. "Morning, son," an older, grizzled voice rang through. "If you're trying to use the toilet, I'd suggest going out back." "All right, Pa." Sylvester returned to his room, defeated, and stripped the dirty clothing from his body. He put on fresh clothes and a healthy amount of deodorant and left his room. Steps echoed every time his boots hit the ground. The stairs opened to the living room, followed by the kitchen, where it smelled like his ma had whipped up quite the feast. He hung his hat on a hook and sat down. "Morning, sweetie. How'd you sleep?" the woman asked as she flipped a pancake. "I slept all right," he replied. "You feeling okay? You don't typically sleep a whole day away." She turned to look at him for the first time that morning. He really didn't. Most of the time, he was lucky to sleep past 6 in the morning. Sylvester smiled at his ma. "I'm fine, thank you. Just needed some extra sleep, I guess." The woman smiled and took his answer at face value. Sylvester knew that it was nothing to do with the need for sleep. Instead, everything was caused by the thing that now lived within him. He considered telling her the truth as he sat down at the table, but chose not to. She set a plate down in front of him. 2 eggs, 3 pieces of bacon, and 3 pancakes. Then she returned to the stove and prepared for the man occupying their only bathroom to come down and eat his breakfast. "Thanks, Ma. That was great," he announced only a few minutes later. "Sylvester Pemberton, you ate that far too fast." She turned and frowned at him. "I haven't eaten since Saturday's dinner," he offered as an answer. "That's no excuse, young man. You shouldn't eat so fast. It's not healthy for you." She flipped an egg with ease as she lectured him. "Sorry, Ma. I'm gonna get to work. Think you or Pa can run me out to pick up my truck? It's at the old Rollins place." "What's it doing out there?" the older, deeper voice asked with authority as his pa entered the kitchen. "I was having a few beers in the back, listening to music, and passed out. Battery's dead. Old Reliable was dead. Was gonna take care of it yesterday after I woke up, but we all know what happened after I went back to sleep." Sylvester stood up, taking his hat from the hook. "I'm busy all day. Got that field to work. You heading into town at all, Ma?" Using gas for something like this wasn't taken lightly. "Nope. You'll just have to walk it." The woman set a plate on the table. "Now sit and eat your breakfast, hun." The burly man sat down and slowly ate his food. He was in his late 50s, but he was built like a man in his early 30s. He looked at Sylvester, pausing a moment as he swallowed. "If things change, I'll let you know, but don't count on it. You've got a full day ahead of you, too. Make sure that thing's charged before you head that way either way." "Already charged it," he replied. "Don't worry about it. We'll get that thing later." The voice interrupted. Sylvester smiled at his parents. "I'm going to start my day. Let me know if you need help in the East Fields." "I'll send you a text," the old man grumbled. "Sure, and I'll start shooting smoke signals as a reply," Sylvester joked. They couldn't afford cell phones. They could barely afford the landline they did have. The older man laughed, stopping the fork an inch from his face. Sylvester always liked leaving him in a good mood. As he left the house, he returned his hat to his head and walked to the barn. He was in charge of ensuring all of the animals were fed and tending to the west fields. They grew mainly hay, but had to rely on old, worn-down machinery and the power of the 2 oxen they owned to till and cut the fields. Sylvester threw a feed bag over his shoulder and carried it to the first pen. "Is now a good time to talk to you?" Tempus had a lot to go over with the man. "I suppose it's as good as any," he replied as he spread feed for their chickens. "Beat you to your crowing, you son of a bitch," he announced to the bird, staring at him. "You have a problem with that bird?" Tempus was clearly confused. "Nah, he's just a dick. Always waking me up when I'm not out feeding him or his flock early enough." Sylvester shook the feed bag for the birds. "All right." Tempus figuratively shook its head. "We have a lot to go over, but there's some basics that I really need to tell you." "Well, you have until lunch. I don't like the whole speaking in my head thing, and that's the next time we'll be around anyone else." He managed to get used to the idea of no longer being an I, and instead being a we. The Pemberton farm had a total of 3 employees. Al Pemberton, Janet Pemberton, and Sylvester Pemberton. Al exclusively worked the fields to the east. He didn't handle the animals any longer. That was a job for the younger, more agile and flexible Sylvester. Janet handled the finances and the selling of crops or herds. Essentially, she was management, but rarely checked on either of the men. By lunch, she would have something put together for both of them. "All right, then here's your basic rules of our newfound abilities," Tempus announced.